Welcome to Murder and Everything Else. My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl. And Joy and I are two very old friends who are going to talk about murder and everything else. So, Joy, I must share with our listeners what I shared with you about my battery, because I feel so many emotions about it, like horrified, fascinated, a little bit stupid. But you guys, I had an old laptop. It was about 10 years old. So I had to get a new one. And the tech guys told me that they're like, did you notice all the cracking? The back of my old laptop, Joy, was literally cracking. Like,
Wow.
It was like, did you ever see Alien? No,
Yeah.
of course not. Oh, remember when that thing comes out of the guy's stomach?
Oh, yeah.
It pops up. It's like something was trying to get out of my laptop in the back because it had cracked and like opened. And anyway, he goes, did you notice it was cracking and bulging? I go, yeah. I knew it was old. I was like, yeah. He goes, I knew it was old. He goes, it was ready to explode at any moment.
Oh my God.
So they took it out and disposed of it. So that was very scary, you guys. So if your laptop or any electronic device looks like something out of the movie Alien, you must have it addressed. Because I could not believe how close I came to some horrific accident.
Wow.
Yeah, so just a word of caution, please learn from my mistakes. And don't pronounce it Reuters. That's what I have to say about that, Joy.
That's right. Wow. I'm so glad that, it didn't catch on fire or...
Oh my God.
Burst out.
They said explode. He used the actual word explode. It wasn't like it was going to leak or he's like, it was going to explode. So let my experience be a cautionary tale for you. Do not ignore your electronic devices that are cracking and look like there's an alien about to come out of it.
That's right.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really scary.
That's a crazy story, but you know what? Technology can also be our friend.
That's true. Imagine life without technology. Would you be able to go backwards to answering machines and shit like that? Boy, that's technology too.
And cassette tapes and 8 tracks. Good Lord. Well, on that note, Cheryl, let's roll into updates. I just want everyone who's listening to this to know that neither Cheryl and I are doing any ads right now or getting any endorsements from any companies. When we shout people out or stuff, that's because we really like it. But listen to this, Cheryl. I got my Rakuten check. My Rakuten check today, and guess how much it was for?
$75.
$109.22.
Oh my God.
If you are shopping online and not using Rakuten, you are really missing out. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, reach out to me at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com. I had to think about our email because we never get there.
She doesn't know.
Or reach out to me on Instagram, or reach out to me on text, or reach out to me on TikTok or Twitter or Facebook. Listen to this. Guess how much I've gotten from Rakuten year to date. Just guess.
When did you start? Give me that hint.
Well, I get a check. Remember, they send out a check every quarter. So
I know, but when did you start shopping through them?
Like years ago, like 8 years ago or something.
Oh, Jesus. I'm $500.
Yes. No, but I'm saying, guess how much I just got this year, 2024.
Oh, okay. This is August. $250.
$358.20.
Oh my God. I got a check from them. I got a check from them this week. $10.
Hot damn. Hey, that's $10 more than you had before, right?
That's right. It is actually pretty incredible.
That
Except
paid
now I
for a
have to
crunch wrap.
physically go to the bank. That's the only problem with this. But
Oh, you
yeah,
can't do mobile deposit?
I'm scared. I scared of that. Remember back in
Oh,
the day, Joy,
dude,
when you
you
used
are
to order
not
books?
going
Remember when you
to
used to
deposit
order?
checks.
You remember when you went on? You used to buy books on Amazon. You guys went
Mhm.
before Amazon was was what it is was what it is right now. They sold books first, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they started with that. And Joy has always been ahead of your time, ahead of her time. Joy has always been ahead of her time. She told me she would buy books online, and I was so scared for her. I was like, "Oh my God, you're not worried about like identity theft and all that jazz." And you know what? You did have a couple of
I did. But I
and I was
got
like,
all
"See,
my problems solved. Like, remember I
no,
ordered a
you did
crib and they charged me for two? But
right." I mean,
I mean, it all worked out. And look,
no,
I'm still a step ahead. So, you
yeah.
know,
Well, and now and yeah, but you were ahead of your time because now I don't want to go out of the house to shop. So,
now you
but
get everything from Amazon. I'm surprised you aren't ordering your vegetables from Amazon.
I would if I could.
Um, well, Cheryl, do you have any updates for us?
I, I do have an update because I mentioned it last time that I was going to cut my bangs, and I did, and I love it. I love it. I'm so glad that I didn't do a half job by myself because you know when you get that inkling to do something, you like want to do it
Mhm.
right then and there. So one night I went on YouTube Shorts or TikTok or something, and I was watching people cut their own bangs, and I had the willpower not to try to do it because
Yeah,
I've
because
tried
they
it.
also have the people who twist their hair in a circle, then they cut it and it's just a giant disaster. I'm like, why would you do that?
I tried that twisting method and it wasn't a disaster, but it's definitely not good.
Oh
Leave
my
your
god,
bangs to the professionals. Leave it
yeah,
to the
I have
professionals. Oh,
I had the best story when I was so I'm 8 years older than my youngest brother. When he was 6 or 7, I cut his hair once sitting on the back porch of our house. And the scissors were so sharp that I sliced the top of his ear off without meaning to. And you know how, like, your head bleeds profusely? There's blood spraying everywhere. I mean, it looked like one of those movies like Monty Python where the blood's like spurting out. And he sees the blood and he starts screaming hysterically.
oh, of
And
course.
I
Oh
am
my God.
laughing so hard I can't
You're
stop
laughing?
laughing. Yeah, because it was just the hilarity of the whole situation. Of course,
Oh,
I
that's
feel bad,
hilarious.
but because he's screeching and blood is spurting everywhere, I'm just dying. And I'm trying to
That
apply pressure. I mean, needless to say, I never cut his hair again after that. He wouldn't let me near his head with
well,
scissors.
did he have to have stitches? And what did your
No,
mom say when she got home?
it was just this tiny little nick. But again, remember how your head bleeds profusely? So anyway, just here to say sorry. Sorry, really, I didn't mean to do that. I was, in all fairness, I think our mom was just trying to save a buck. I also am not a hairdresser, so what was I doing cutting my brother's hair? Like, that's the
Oh my
bigger
God.
story.
Oh
Anyway,
my.
that's a terrible, terrible, terrible haircut story. So
Only
good
you.
thing TikTok
Only
wasn't
you.
around then, because it might have ended up on TikTok.
I'm sure it would have.
I have a
Oh,
shout out this week, Cheryl. I would
mhm.
like to
Yeah.
shout out my dog walker, Alon. He is amazing. He walks my dogs each week. I'd also like to shout out the house sitter that we used this summer, Stella. You are also amazing, and I appreciate both of you so much. Thanks to the two of you. You make things happen around here, and we all appreciate it so much. You know, it's hard to come by a good, like, house sitter and a good dog walker, people that you trust, that you're letting into your
Yeah.
home, and then you're putting your like fur babies in their care. So
I would
those are
be
very
so
important people.
paranoid. I would be so paranoid having
So
anybody watch. Yeah.
you could put a camera
Yeah.
in your house, and then you could see what they're doing while you're not there.
Yeah. And I spend most of my time away watching them. I may as well just
Would you
stay
get
home
like
and watch them
nervous
myself.
that they'd like take their balls out and like rub them on your sofa?
The dog sitter or the dog?
Both.
Hey, by the way, I watched that video of the pole vaulter. I finally did. I forgot about it for a while.
Oh my God, isn't it great?
Yeah. And they did like a freeze frame when his junk hits the pole. And it really did get in the way.
Hey, Cheryl, do you have any shout outs, or was that the shout out for the French pole vaulter
For the
again?
French,
For
yeah.
2 weeks running.
Shout out. He had a big disappointment, but I heard that he was contacted to do like a bunch of I don't think it was porn, but it was some I forgot what it was. I just watched it today and I don't remember. But
I
he
bet
was,
he's going to be an underwear ad. He would make a great
something like
underwear commercial where he puts
fashion.
on some like tidy whities, and they could shove some socks in there to bulk it up. And then he'll say stuff like,
Well, apparently he doesn't need any enhancements.
He'll be like, hey, I forgot to wear my tidy whities, my Calvin Kleins when I was pole vaulting, or something like that.
If I had been wearing these, I would have struck gold. Wait, what's the word?
If I'd have been wearing these, I would have kept the motorcycle in the garage. I don't know. I would have kept the hot dog in the package.
Oh gosh. My shout out real quick is I had to leave the place that I love working. And today was my last day. And so I want to give a shout out to all the employees. I loved working with them so much. I did a great job. I didn't cry.
Aww.
But there's one person in particular. She's a med tech and her name's Maggie. And Maggie, I love you so much and I'm going to miss you. And I wish you the very best that life has to offer.
And guys, if you feel like you have deja vu, I know I do. I feel like Cheryl has quit like 14 jobs. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're having deja vu, because I am so deja vu.
But hey, if you guys know of a good remote job, please run into murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
OnlyFans and feet pics. I'm here to tell you,
God.
You can do it. Hey, I have a letter from our listeners. I got a text message from a listener saying she couldn't listen to our last podcast because of all the popping and crackling sounds. She said she got part of the way through, but she just had to stop. She said it was the popping and crackling, and also it was really long. So I'm sorry about that, Cheryl, but I think you won't have that happen again the next time you're listening to the podcast that you help make. So
no, it was somebody else.
I'm pretty sure we've fixed the problem since you listened to it today. So next week,
you decide
to listen to us, you're going to be pleasantly surprised that all the popping and crackling is gone.
Yeah, we apologize for that, you guys.
Cheryl watched. She invested valuable time and energy in a documentary, and she's going to I'm going to open up the floor to Cheryl so she can tell us all about her murder documentary and how all that went down.
Yes, I'm going to tell you about it. So, I watched Face to Face with Scott Peterson on Peacock. It premiered on August 20th. And I had it marked on my calendar because when I spoke about Scott Peterson, did I know at that time that there was a documentary coming out? I think I did, right? Anyway, So you guys, I invested the time to watch it. It's a 3-part series, and I am going to say right off the bat that it's, as documentaries go, it's not very good. So save yourself the time of watching it and just listen to me. And I will tell you what I gleaned from those 4. No, it was much longer than that because I had to keep rewinding. But just, I've invested the time so that you don't have to, and you can get it all in less than an hour here. So 20 years ago, Scott Peterson was convicted of murdering his wife, Lacey, and unborn son, Connor. He was sentenced to death, and then it was commuted to life without parole. He has not done any on-camera interviews since before his arrest until now. So that's what really intrigued me. I wanted to hear what he had to say after 20 years of not speaking on camera. And this is an aside. I don't want anybody to have any type of response to this other than I'm just saying that some people, some men look really good when they age, and he looks good. Because he had that kind of chubby baby face before, and now he's really like, he's probably in his 50s now, right? I'm going to assume he was in his 30s at the time he went into prison.
But Cheryl, I just want to jump in really quickly here and just say, you say he's not done any on-camera interviews, but I think about the vast number of people who go to prison for murder who never ever get an interview because they're not someone famous or they're not in the news. Maybe nobody was reaching out to him asking him for interviews.
Maybe. I doubt it. It's the high profile ones that everybody wants to hear from, right? So I would think he was asked. Don't you? Because it's the high profile. Know. After a while it does fade though. So like Jodi Arias was all in the news, and I guess there's only so much you can ask them. But I thought it was interesting that after 20 years he was going to do an interview. But you're right. I think people are taking a look at this again, and so it's worth interviewing him now. I don't know. That's why I wanted to watch it. So January 18th of this year, 2024, the LA Innocence Project takes on his case to set him free. The new motion revolves around the theory that Lacey was killed by burglars. There was a burned out van found close to Lacey and Scott's house that had a mattress in it with bloodstains. And he and his attorneys want the mattress tested. That was January 18th. April 16th of this year, 2024, there's a second status hearing. The defense attorneys argue there's evidence that did not come out during the trial. And then March 12th of this year, status hearing, 2 objectives was to get the discovery and the DNA testing they're requesting as soon as possible, and also, again, arguing for the release of evidence that did not come out during trial. So during the documentary, they're also interviewing the detectives that were part of this case. So, of course, they're saying, why didn't this come up before, during the trial or back then? And I'll get into that a little bit later. So I'm following this in chronological order of the documentary. So it is going to go back and forth between the time that the murder happened and the trial, and then present day when he's being interviewed. And I tried to include a lot of what he said because there's been a lot out already of his story of, and Lacey's murder. So I really wanted to, the whole thing was to watch it to see what he has to say about certain things.
Right.
But I got to tell you, in the end, I already said it, it was disappointing as a documentary. But the documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist, her name's Shireen Anderson. She started researching Scott's case in 2013, and her initial thought was that he was probably guilty. But when she started looking at the evidence and facts, she started to question it. Scott's case was built on circumstantial evidence, which is what I said when we did an episode on him. Each piece could be looked at as both supporting his guilt and his innocence. So the investigators, there's an investigator that's working for the family. He says that, and everybody says it is. The evidence, you can look at it. If you think he's guilty, it looks like it supports his guilt. If you think he's innocent, the evidence looks like it supports his innocence. So it's really kind of frustrating. Anyway, because of this, like duality of the evidence, that it could be looked at as guilt or innocent, she decided to make a documentary about it. So she reached out to Scott Peterson. She didn't hear back from him, but she did hear from someone in his family. So this is when she first started in 2013. So another big part of this documentary is Scott's sister-in-law, Janie Peterson. She's married to Scott's older brother, and she believes he was wrongly convicted. Shireen has so it's his brother's wife that's doing a lot of the legwork with the documentarian to get Scott free. Well, the documentarian's not really, in it to get Scott free, but she's interviewed a lot, Janie Peterson. So Shireen has a lot of questions for Scott and is interested to see how far he will go with his answers. So from Ione, California, is that pronounced correctly? Don't correct me later. Ione, is that right, Joy? I'm going to say Ione, California. From Mule Creek Prison, she sits down to talk with Scott for the first time, and she asks him, why should anyone want to hear his side of the story? Why should anyone care what he has to say 21 years later? And this is what he says. He says, if I have a chance to get the reality out there, I have a chance to show people what the truth is. And if they're willing to accept it, maybe that takes a little bit of hurt off my family. Shireen Anderson, a documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist, started researching Scott's case in 2013. Her initial thought was that he was probably guilty, but when she started looking at the evidence and facts, she started to question it. Scott's case was built on circumstantial evidence. Remember, when in our episode I said that, but there have been a lot of convicted murderers, or a lot of murderers that were convicted on circumstantial evidence, because if what's the saying? I don't know what the saying is. If it looks like if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's probably a duck. Anyway, so each piece of the evidence could be looked at as both supporting his guilt and supporting his innocence. It depended on what side you were on. If you thought he was innocent, you would say that points to his innocence. Same with the guilty, right? So it made it very frustrating. So she decided to make a documentary about it, and she reached out to Scott Peterson back in 2013, and she didn't hear back from him, but she did hear from someone in his family, and that's Scott's sister-in-law, Janie Peterson. She's married to Scott's older brother, and she believes he was wrongly convicted. And she is a huge part of this documentary and a huge part of the movement to get him freed, which is very interesting. Shireen has a lot of questions for Scott, and she's interested to see how far he will go with his answers. So from Ione, California, he's in Mule Creek Prison right now. She sits down to talk with Scott for the first time. She asks him, why should anyone want to hear his side of the story? Why should anyone care what he has to say 21 years later? And he says, if I have a chance to get the reality out there, I have a chance to show people what the truth is. And if they're willing to accept it, maybe that takes a little bit of hurt off of my family. And that would be the biggest thing I can accomplish right now. Don't trust me, look at the evidence. Scott is asked about the night Lacey went missing and about the detectives coming over to look at his house. He says they came over already thinking he was involved. He went down to the police station to be interviewed and said the questions from the detectives were more like accusations. He's accused of being too laid back in the interview. The Scott says he was just trying to keep it together and get the search started. The detective says the phone message that Scott left Lacey on the morning she disappeared was too sweet and felt it was staged. This is kind of what he says in the voicemail. They're saying that he set it up so that He had already killed her. This is the detective's theory. He had already killed her. He went fishing to get rid of her body. And on the way back, to have an alibi, to make it look like it wasn't involved, he leaves her this voicemail, acting like everything's fine. And it's very sweet. He's like, hi, beautiful. He calls her beautiful. Hi, beautiful. I'm on my way back. Something, something, something. It's very short. And this is one of those pieces you can look at either way. He's asked about this, and Scott says that he and Lacey had that type of relationship. He called her beautiful. She called him cutie. And when you listen to it, it's very indicative of the evidence being able to support each way. Because on one hand, I thought there wasn't really anything out of the norm. There are people, he even says from prison, he's like, if they think that this is something extra special that I said, I feel sorry for them and their marriages. And it's kind of true. It's like, he just said, hi, beautiful. I'm on my way back, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I guess people are used to husbands and wives being really nasty to each other.
Yeah. Hey, dickhead, I'll be there in 10 minutes. All right, piece of shit. Like, seriously. All right.
I mean, really?
Your breath smells. Get away from me.
It's true, because but if you want to look at it through a guilty lens, it's like, oh, he's being too sweet, he was trying to cover up already. And I don't know, but this is a perfect example. You guys go listen to this voicemail he left, and you tell us if this leans towards his guilt or his innocence. So he says he decided to go fishing on the morning of December 24th, so Christmas Eve morning. This is when Lacey goes missing. So he says he was going to go fishing. Yet his fishing, and he says he decided that morning to go fishing. But his fishing license was for December 23rd and 24th. So that's very suspicious, right? Because he told the detectives because he tells them on the morning of December 24th is when I made the decision to go fishing. If that were true, when he goes to get the fishing license, why does it say it's for the 23rd and 24th? The 23rd is already passed. So
but maybe he went on the 23rd to get the fishing license, and they issue it for the day that you go and the next day. Because like going fishing, you have to take your boat out. You have to hook it up to your truck. I mean, it's a process. You have to get all your tackle, all your gear. You have to get your cooler. You have to get your clothing.
Are you speaking from firsthand experience?
I've been fishing
really
before, and I've also dated people who were fishers or fishermen or fisher boys. I don't know what they're called. Gabe is not a fisher guy. But I will say that because it's a process, and also a lot of people who fish, I know this about people who fish, they go to different lakes. Sometimes they'll go to 2 lakes in one day.
In a day? Yeah.
They'll go fish in the morning, and they also fish at odd hours. So they'll get a fishing license sometimes, I don't know, maybe I think it would be interesting to check and see with the agency that issues the fishing license. Do they issue them for 48 hours or do they issue them for 24? Because I do know that some people, a lot of men like to fish at the hours of like 4 to 6 a.m. when it's very still, because that's when the fish are biting. When there's lots of boats on the water and motorboats and water skiers and, jet skiers and all that, the fish don't come up to the surface because it's too noisy. They stay down at the bottom where it's cool and quiet, or hot and quiet. I don't know. But I would love, that's the other thing is sometimes, well, now I'm an expert because I've been doing this for a year and 9 months. But I feel like the police sometimes are very shoddy, and maybe it's because they don't have enough people on board, or they don't have enough like manpower to do the discovery. One of the questions I would have had was, let's call the fishing license issuer or whatever. It's got to be like Parks and Recreation, or something like that, and ask, how long do you standard, or when someone comes in for a fishing license for the next day, do you issue 2 days, 1 day? Do you issue from the time of request? You know, do
Okay,
you
wait.
give,
Well,
or
hold
do
on,
you get
hold
it
on.
for a week? How does it go?
Okay, you're missing. So he tells the detectives. So I went over this in our episode of Scott Peterson, but tells the detectives he was going to go golfing at first, but it was too cold. So he decided to go fishing. Okay.
Which is hilarious
That
because nothing is colder than fishing.
I know, being out on a boat and on the water. So that was already like head scratching moment, right? Then
Right.
it sounds like it was the spur of the moment decision to go on the morning of December 4th, but his fishing license says the 23rd and 24th. I understand what you're saying, but if it's a 48-hour thing, then it wouldn't have been 24th and 25th. Why would it have been retro? It's already the 24th. Why would it have been for the 23rd? So the detectives are thinking, no, he planned this.
Oh,
He
I
actually
see.
got it sooner. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but I will also say that I do know this also about fishermen. They don't, like, if they wake up and go, I want to go fishing. I mean, to me, I just don't have that kind of interest in something that would I'd be freezing sitting out on a boat in the middle of a lake. Like, I mean,
I
I don't get it. But
well,
I know that fishermen are diehard, like, aficionados and love the sport so much that they don't care that it's freaking freezing and that they're shivering out there. They still go.
yeah, I know. And can I just say something about fishing and hunting and all of that? You can take this out if it gets too long. But I don't see any fun in just sitting there and trying to trap something on my fishing line, these poor things that are just swimming around living their lives.
Well,
And
here's
I'm
the
sitting there for how long trying to catch them, just like the hunting. I have this big ass rifle and the deer or whatever has nothing. I don't understand the sport in that.
well,
Catch
here's
them, catch the fish and the deer barehanded, and then you have a fair fight.
well, here's what I will say about the fishing. I mean, one of the things, we have a lake near our house, and there's guys and gals out there fishing all the time, but I'm pretty sure that body of water is so contaminated.
Ugh.
If you ate something that you caught out of that lake, you would probably get like amoebic dysentery. And I mean, like, you'd probably have to check yourself into the hospital because I don't think it's healthy. But I will also say a lot of people who are diehard fisher people, because
Fisher people. We
women
have to
love
say
sports, so
politically correct.
they'll do catch and release because it's all
Well,
about the
that
catch.
I don't fucking understand that either. But anyway, we could go on and on about the fish.
Right.
But I do want to say this. When I am talking about the evidence, because this is a documentary heavily leaning towards the evidence being looked at as him being innocent. I mean, there are the detectives that are on there that stand by their work that they did 20 years ago and all of that. Just as an exercise, I want to look at this as if we're with the Innocence Project and look at the evidence and see if there's reasonable doubt. Like, you could look at it, like the voicemail that he left. I didn't
Right.
think that much of it. Okay, so the detective says that Scott went to fish at a place that was 90 miles away, even though there were many reservoirs that were close to his house. He lived in Modesto, California. There was evidence at the warehouse where he kept his boat that there were 5 homemade anchors made, but police only found one. There were a pair of needle nose pliers found at the bottom of the boat with hair entwined in it. And Lacey could not be excluded as being the donor of the hair. That's kind of like, he's asked why he brought the boat for his father-in-law, Lacey's stepfather, why he bought it for him for Christmas. And he says he wanted his father-in-law to have a relationship with his unborn son, Connor. And his father-in-law loved fishing. And it was something to bring him and his father-in-law together as well. He says when he got home from fishing, he didn't have any concerns, so he jumped in the shower. He figured Lacey was with friends or at her mom's house. And since Lacey was not home yet, he then called Lacey's mother to see if she was there. The detective says that Scott said he was concerned about Lacey and questions why. The first thing Scott did when he got home was to remove the bucket of water Lacey had been using to clean that morning, take a shower, do a load of laundry, eat pizza, drink some milk, and listen to some voicemails before calling Lacey's mother. During the interview,
let me just jump in here and remember Scott Peterson also had a girlfriend. So, who he was boning during this time. So the coming home and taking a shower, even if he had, okay, if he'd been fishing, he would have been smelly. So of course you're going to take a shower. I have a spouse that has a hobby that's riding road bikes, and so when he comes home from his hobby, he's smelly. So the first thing he does is take a shower. And then he takes his wet and sweaty, like, by cycling stuff to the laundry because it's stinky too. So, and then he's starving, So I don't know if I really find that to be questionable. Also, he had a girlfriend. So if he had been off boning his girlfriend, I'll guarantee you that he was used to coming home and the first thing he did was take a shower. Because everybody who knows, when someone's married and they got a side piece, you got to shower because you don't want to smell like the perfume of the side piece when you're coming home to your wife.
Right. So I feel the same way. And Scott says he wasn't that concerned. So his actions seem completely innocent to me. He wasn't that concerned about her. He figured she was at her mom's. It was Christmas Eve morning. He thought she was probably helping her cook. And so he did all these things first and then called the mom. The detective says that Scott said he was very concerned. So there's some conflicting information there because Scott says he wasn't that concerned, and the detective says that Scott said he was concerned. And see, right there could be a discrepancy that Scott was concerned, but maybe not freaking panicked. And yeah, he just thought I would take a shower, and then I'll call her, So that again could be looked at either way, right? And so the other thing is that during the interview, the detective says that Scott refers to Lacey in the past tense and mentions that it would be nice to get grief counselors for the family. And she hasn't even been, she's just missing at this point. He claims all the reports about him not seeming concerned were false. He's asked about the public's claims that he acted weird and that he didn't cry. And he says he was unwilling for the first few weeks to go on camera and give them the terrible emotions he was feeling. Even though Scott gave the detectives permission to search the house, they came back with a search warrant. They weren't able to find anything conclusive that something violent happened in the house. The only thing they could say was that the search eliminated anyone else coming to the house and abducting Lacey. Scott says they had a confirmation that the police had a confirmation bias where they only look at evidence which supports their bias, and that's what they did. He said detectives went into their house not to look for Lacey, but to look for evidence against him. He said there was absolutely no forensic evidence in the house, yet they continued to focus on him. The detectives then went to the warehouse Scott used for his boat and found a flatbed trailer next to the boat. And on the flatbed trailer, cement powder rings and residue was found, consistent with someone making several different concrete anchors, like I said before. There was one anchor that was in the boat, and it looked like there were 5 made. Now, when they show a picture of this, I guess there was the outline of these anchors, and it was a paint can that was used to pour the concrete in, and then it dried, it was pulled out. So it's the size of a paint can. I guess they saw circles, and they only found one in the boat. So the theory is the others were used to weight her body down. When Scott's asked about this, he says he only made one, and there's no evidence he made more than that. And when you see the picture, it's kind of like, yeah, you can't really tell that there's 5. You can't. It's not clear circles, and there's just a bunch of cement powder around. So again, it's like, I don't know. The police didn't have a motive at that point, but then Amber Fry comes forward and she says she has been dating Scott Peterson. The police theorize that Scott killed Lacey because he didn't want to be married or be a father. He says it's offensive and disgusting and absolutely not true. He says he regrets cheating on Lacey and thinks it was about a childish lack of self-esteem. Being lonely because he was traveling and not at home. Shireen asks him why he continued to see Amber after Lacey disappeared. He said he was searching for his family and wanted the search to continue. And he felt if he stayed in touch with Amber, she wouldn't get into the picture, complicate it, and ruin the search for Lacey. He felt the search for Lacey would stop once police and the public knew that he was having sex with another woman. The knowledge of Amber was a time bomb, he says, and says the fear he had absolutely came to fruition. So what do you think?
I have to jump in here.
Yeah, please.
I have to say that I don't believe this or support this at all. First of all, there's a very good chance that Scott Peterson was a cheater all along. So there's a good chance that before Amber, there was someone else, and before that someone else, there was someone else.
Yeah.
And Lacey probably, who knows? I will say that it's pretty, and I don't agree with this, but you hear a lot of times when there's cheating in a relationship, a lot of times it happens when a woman is pregnant, and that's because one, obviously she's got a lot on her hands, okay? Her body's busy, her brain is busy, everything's busy.
Body's busy having his kid. You guys that cheat,
exactly.
You guys that are pregnant, fuck you, shame on you.
And I think that a lot of times what it does is it is indicative of maybe someone who is not emotionally developed. And also there are those people out there who have that whole Madonna whore thing where once their wife gets pregnant and has a child, they no longer see them as a sexual being and they see them as a mother and a mother figure like the Madonna. And so they can't do things that they did before, such as poke their penis into them. So I just think that Scott Peterson was a cheater. He probably had cheated before. He probably would have cheated again. So I don't buy that. And also, Amber wasn't living under a rock. So she was bound to see the news and see his face and
so realization.
Exactly. And he withheld it from her. And I will say that she dodged a bullet because who knows, maybe she would have been next.
Well, what do you think about him saying that he felt the search for Lacey would stop if the police knew about Amber?
No.
That's why he didn't say anything.
That's so stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, he was just hoping it wouldn't come out, which is really stupid.
Well, it's not the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but it's up there.
So these are the things that might point to reasonable doubt. And so when I watched it, I was like, yeah, it's plausible. That to me, that causes some reasonable doubt. So the evidence showed that Scott left his house around 10 a.m. that morning. So if Lacey is spotted after 10 a.m., then Scott is innocent. So his family hired a private investigator who finds several witnesses that say they saw Lacey walking their dog well after 10 a.m. They can describe what she was wearing, and each notices her not only because of her beauty, but her big, beautiful golden retriever. Scott is asked about this. He says he wasn't the last person to see Lacey that day. There are so many credible witnesses that saw her walking around their neighborhood. He said he recently learned that one of the witnesses went to the command center at the police station and talked to the police about seeing Lacey after 10 a.m. Scott says the police told the witness, no, you're wrong. You did not see her, and just dismissed the witness without even looking into it. So they interview several neighbors that saw her at different points. And one of them was a couple, and they distinctly remember, and a lot of people remember what she was wearing, a white top and black pants. But this one couple really remembers her because they said it looked like she was struggling with the dog. The dog was really big, and she's very, very pregnant, and they were worried that the dog was going to pull her down. So it sticks out in their mind, right? Having seen this. So Shireen is interviewing Scott again. She tells him that after his affair with Amber came out, everyone thought he killed Lacey. She asks him how that makes him feel, and he said, horrible. I was a total asshole for having sex outside our marriage. She asks him why he didn't tell the police about his affair, and he says, during the so-called investigation, I really did everything I could to bring my family home. And that included keeping my cheating with Amber from people.
Nope,
I don't
buy
means.
it.
Yeah, I don't. I told you that I didn't believe him when I was watching this.
I mean, because here's the thing: we've already maintained he's a liar and a cheater. So what? So of course, the next clear thing is he's lying. He's lying about stuff. He lied about Amber, even when Amber went to the police and said, "I'm having an affair with I'm this is my boyfriend." He still lied. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So he didn't tell people because he wanted the search to continue, and he says, I guess I understand why he's talking about Amber, and this is the part I told you where when I heard some of the evidence that pointed towards his innocence, I was really questioning. I was like, oh, that really does raise reasonable doubt. But then he talked, and especially this part, I was like, oh, I don't believe you. He says he understands why Amber tried to turn it into a relationship after the fact and made claims that it was something more, but it simply wasn't. And if I were her and watched this, I would be pissed off. He says that's a massive misconception, I think, and I was absolutely wrong, but I embrace the truth on that. It's a horrible truth. These are the thoughts that haunt me, and it's devastating. I feel such shame and guilt that me having sex with Amber Fry caused all of that they didn't look for Lacey alive.
Okay, I just have to jump in here, and I have to say something. And this is probably more geared towards the younger listeners of this podcast, if there are any. If you're just having sex with someone, that is a relationship. It may just be a sexual relationship, but it's a relationship. When you're, you know, like a relationship is a relationship. You can get really nitty gritty and define the relationship, but to say that you were just having sex with somebody and it was not a relationship, that is so childish.
Mm-hmm.
Every relationship that we have all different kinds of relationships, but a sexual relationship is a relationship, whether you want to call it that or not. Okay, maybe they hadn't had the I want to be your girlfriend. Do you want to be my boyfriend? Yeah, I want to be your boyfriend. Will you be my girlfriend? Okay, now we're boyfriend and girlfriend. Or the I'm dating you exclusively. Are you dating me exclusively? Yeah, let's date exclusively. Maybe they hadn't had that conversation yet and they were still just seeing each other, but hooking up, seeing each other, a physical relationship is a relationship. There, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. No, and he behaved like it was a relationship. So to try to backpedal now and say that, she saw it as that and he didn't, I'm like, oh, please. So even as the focus of the investigation appeared to be shifting towards Scott, the Modesto police had not yet named him a suspect. We're talking back then. So I said we're going to bounce back and forth. Investigative journalist Mike Gudgel has been involved with the Peterson case for 2 decades. In 2002, he had been working with ABC News as an editorial producer. It came out that there was a burglary across the street from Scott and Lacey's house that occurred around the time of her disappearance. On December 24th, the day Lacey went missing, a neighbor witnessed strange people on the lawn across from the Petersons, and that would be the Medina family's house. And next to these strange people was a van. And one of the people turned around and looked at her. She said she felt hostility, but didn't think anything of it. But after hearing about Lacey's disappearance, she reported the burglary. Well, she didn't know it was a burglary. She just saw strange people in a van. She reported the incident to police, and she described the 3 men she saw as dark-skinned but not African-American. A reward was put out for information leading to the arrest of these suspects. An informant came forward with the names of 5 men, but only 2 were questioned. They were not dark-skinned. They were very cooperative and passed polygraph tests that they had nothing to do with Lacey's disappearance. The police were skeptical of the reliability of the neighbor's information, particularly the date when she saw these burglars. The police solved the burglary and found out that found out that it occurred on the 26th. So these two guys that were questioned, they confessed to the burglary. But that was according to the two burglars themselves. They said it was on the 26th. But they initially said it was on the 27th. So their date isn't reliable either. So there was a lot of activity on the Peterson street. So this is what's supporting that the burglary could have had a lot more, had something, is responsible. The burglary has to do with her disappearance because, and that the two burglars are lying because she went missing on the 24th. And they're saying that they committed it on the 26th or 27th. They said 27th and then they changed it to the 26th.
Right.
Regardless, it's after the 24th. And on the day of her disappearance, the 24th, and after, there are police swarming that street. So to commit a burglary right across the street, it would have been highly improbable, right? And Scott is on camera saying that the police didn't pursue the other people involved in the burglary, even though we know there are others, right? Because somebody, informant said there were 5 and they only got 2 of them. There was no desire for police to pursue any evidence and instead ignored it and they went with the theory about Scott. So once Scott and Amber's affair comes out, police are focused on Scott and not looking for Lacey, which I don't know what that means. I think they're still looking for her at the same time that they're trying to get evidence on him. So Scott decides to do a couple of interviews, and in one with Diane Sawyer, he claims Lacey knew about the affair and was okay with it. He goes on to say he told the police about his affair on the 24th, and that's bullshit because we know he did not tell the police that. Right, Amber Fry came forward, but he tells Diane Sawyer that he told the police about the affair on the 24th. So it doesn't help him to lie. He says from prison that the interviews were edited and did not show him in a favorable light. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know how we could have shown him in a favorable light. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, even if he didn't kill Lacey and their unborn child, the fact of the matter is every pregnant woman or every woman who's ever had a child wants to like climb up and conk this dude in the nuts. Cause like, I mean, we all put ourselves in those shoes. I mean, yeah, of course we're unavailable. We're cooking an entire human being in our cooch.
I think it's deplorable that he said that she knew when she can't speak for herself, you know, and dispute it.
And I feel like he knew she couldn't.
Yeah, exactly. He knew she wasn't ever going to come back to dispute it. Exactly. Joy, that is such a good point. He said he was spit on and received death threats. He says he wished he could have been stronger, but all of that did take a toll on him. So on April 14, 2003, a female body was discovered on the lake shoreline of Lake Isabel. She was lying face down with duct tape on the front of her torso. A day before, an infant had washed up on shore as well. And at this point, Scott says he didn't think it was Lacey and Connor. He says there have been other bodies that washed up on the shore. Wow, I don't know what kind of place this is, but that he would think a mother and its baby could be someone else. So it wasn't his immediate thought that it was Lacey and Connor. A team of detectives was put on Scott right away. The next day, Scott is tracked moving very early in the morning, so the chase was on. So Shireen, the documentarian, tells Scott she wants to talk about the day of his arrest, which was August 31st, 2002, and what that day was like for him. And he says from prison, when my family was having rough times, we always did something. We'd go fishing or golfing. That's how we relate. That's how we've always gotten together. We never talked about the rough times. We just go do things together. It may seem odd to other people, but we're not guys who talk. And that day I was headed to Torrey Pines Golf Course in San Diego to play golf with my brothers and my dad. We just wanted to get together that day and be together. When I got on the road, I thought there were tabloid reporters following me. I didn't want a picture of me in the press. I had no concept that the police were following me around. So Scott is maneuvering his car around to get away from them. And the police, concerned that Scott was going to cause a collision, they decide to arrest him. And when the cops stopped and arrested him at the entrance of the golf course, there was no protest or questions from Scott. So this is, I mean, I don't know how I would react. We can't really know
Yep.
I don't think you can gauge someone's guilt or innocence or how they're feeling on how they react or don't react, because we all would react differently, right? But if he thought there were tabloid reporters following him, and then he stopped and he finds out there were police, I don't know. She
Okay,
had no reaction.
but here's the other thing. He had dyed his hair and grown a goatee. And then
Yeah,
the
but
other thing is I go back to, and remember I talked about this on a previous episode. When the police stop you and you've tried to alter your appearance, or you got money, or you got like your passport, or you got your, all your like, cleaned out your cash and it's stashed next to you in a bag. I'm sorry. Those are not the actions of an innocent person.
yeah, I know. Well, he says
When
he
I
had.
leave the house, when I leave the house to go to the store, or to go to the post office, or to go to get my hair cut, or go to the gym, or go exercise, or walk the dogs, or whatever, I don't have my hair color changed, a goatee glued to my face, all the money from my checking account in my purse, and everyone's passports. That's just not the actions of an innocent person.
Well, so I had never heard of, because this is the first time he's talking on camera. So he has actually an explanation for this, which I had not heard of before. So you're right. When he was stopped, he had dyed his hair and grown a goatee. And in his car, he had cell phones, Viagra, camping equipment, a shovel, change of clothes, $10,000 cash, and his brother's driver's license.
Ding,
So
ding, 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 ding.
Okay, but Shireen asks him if he was fleeing to Mexico the day he was arrested, and he says, I don't understand that at all. I just want to be clear. I was never running from the police. I was always in contact with them. I'd answer most of their calls. There were times I was very frustrated and would not take their calls. The reason I dyed my hair was because of the harassment and death threats I was getting. I got my brother's driver's license to get a discount. Yeah, I was fraudulently getting a discount to play golf. It's quite expensive for someone out of the county, much cheaper for someone who lives in the county. I guess I was just scamming the golf course a little bit. Once I was arrested, I thought the police would soon come to realize that they'd made a mistake. So news of his arrest comes out. Okay. News of Scott's arrest comes out. His sister-in-law, Janie, says as far as him being in San Diego, his family is there. So it wasn't that he was fleeing. And with regard to the $10,000 cash, Scott's brother was going to buy his truck from him, and he had given Scott the cash, and Scott was still carrying the cash at the point he was arrested. San Diego borders Mexico, and he was arrested 30 miles from the Mexican border, but that's just where his family was. So are those plausible explanations, Joy, or is he just the most unlucky guy in the world?
Unlucky and really, really, really foolish. Here's the thing, Cheryl. I have a hard time driving around with $200 in my wallet. You know why? Because if somebody takes your wallet, you can replace all of the things in your wallet except for the cash. $10,000 is a substantial amount of money. Unless you're going straight to buy the car that minute, you don't just drive around with 10 grand in your
No, his brother bought the truck from him and gave him the money. And so he was still carrying it. That's not possible?
Yeah, no, you'd go straight to the bank.
Okay. So after Scott was arrested, the detectives are driving him back from San Diego to Modesto, and they tell him the bodies of the woman and baby have been identified as Lacey and Connor. When Scott received the news, the detective said he just kind of made a sniffling noise, and that was it. There were no screams, no hysterics. But are we to expect that every person is going to scream and go into hysterics?
I'm the wrong person to ask this question.
You're on team guilty. So
yeah, I mean, of course, not hysterics. I mean, obviously, a lot of men are not criers or emotionally reactive.
But, or they don't want to show emotions in front of other people.
Yeah, but keep reading. Keep reading.
You're not supposed to be reading ahead. Hey. So he bowed his head up. The detective says, and I wrote it exactly how he said it. He bowed his head and a tear came out of his right eye. Oh, his right eye felt sad. 15 miles later, Scott ate a double-double, shake and fries from In-N-Out. It's pretty good. and gobbled it down like it was nothing. Scott says, I didn't think it was them. So when they told me, I had a terrible physical reaction. It was a really emotional physical reaction, but I was in a car with those two detectives, really didn't even believe the police so much when they told me. Part of me just said it's not possible. So that whole thing. Sister-in-law Janie puts a different perspective on it and says Scott had been in custody all day. They made it seem like he was told his wife and child were dead and he ate a cheeseburger 5 minutes later. She says what began as a fight to find Lacey became a fight to save Scott's life. During the trial, the prosecutors basically only had the affair and where the body washed up as their strongest evidence. They kind of bumbled their case a few times. For example, Scott had told the detectives that the morning she went missing, they were watching her favorite show, which was Martha Stewart. And Scott said that Martha Stewart was talking about making meringue. At the trial, the prosecutors say that meringue wasn't talked about on the episode that aired on the 24th, but then the defense gets up and shows that part of the episode from the 24th, and sure enough, Martha is talking about meringue. Prosecutors basically had a lot of accusations without evidence to back it up. And during the trial, legal experts said there was no way the jury was going to find him guilty. Scott's attorney, a pretty famous guy named Mark Garagos, was able to see reasonable doubt with a lot of the state's witnesses. The defense was winning at one point. But then Garagos overpromised and underdelivered. In his opening statement, he told the jury he was not only going to plant reasonable doubt, but he was going to prove Scott's innocence and that the actual perpetrator was still out there and they planned on finding that person, which is so stupid. You just want to stick to the matter at hand, which is to create reasonable doubt for your client. You don't need to say, we're going to find the guilty person. And then the entire trial shifted when Amber Fry's affair was introduced to the jury. The prosecution had transcripts of Amber and Scott's phone calls that the jury was not only able to hear, but read when they listened to the recorded calls. The judge would not allow evidence about the burglary at the Medina house. Without that evidence, there is no other theory to put forth for the jury. The defense did not bring in the witnesses that said they saw Lacey walking their dog after 10 a.m. when Scott left the house. And jurors who were later interviewed said that this would have influenced their decision. The prosecutors had made the witnesses doubt their own statements. So Garagos chose not to use them in Scott's defense. Part of the defense's mistake is they wanted to get the trial over with quickly. So this is where it comes in, the speedy trial thing comes in. They wanted to get the trial over with quickly. They really felt that the prosecution did not have enough evidence, and they just wanted Scott to be able to continue to go on with his life. And legal experts say the defense did not have enough time to really understand the case and defend it properly. Scott says, I would not waste time on my trial, and I look back on that now, and I wonder if that was the right decision. We had the evidence of my innocence. It was a nightmare being stuck in county jail. I just wanted to show it as soon as possible, and I would not let Garagos waste time. And now I look back on some of the things we've learned, and I wonder if I had been more prudent or patient, maybe things would have been different. Because remember in Brian Kohberger's, after his arrest, the one for the Idaho murders, he could have had a speedy trial, which would have forced, they would gone to trial in, I don't know, is it 60, 90 days or something? But his defense attorney said no, because she needed time to get the case together, which is probably, a good move. So as we all know, he was found guilty of first and second degree murder. But was he found guilty because people hated him, or was there enough evidence to convict? Scott says, I was totally expecting to go home that day. It was just like this horrible physical reaction I had. Everything just kind of went silent. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. I couldn't feel the chair I was sitting in. My vision was even a little blurry. And I just had this weird sensation that I was falling forward, and I was staggered by it. I had no idea it was coming. Most people hated Scott and cheered when they heard the guilty verdict, but the family did receive a lot of support from people who thought he was not guilty and did not receive a fair trial. Not long after the dust settled, everyone started to realize this doesn't feel like this is right. This doesn't sound like it was a powerful, compelling case. Legal experts felt the questions that should be answered in a trial for someone to be found guilty of first-degree murder, like the who, what, when, and why, were not answered. Where was the murder committed? How? There's so much reasonable doubt that we're still talking about it today. Has an innocent man been in prison for 20 years? Scott is often accused of showing no emotion, and was the case at sentencing. He says he was indignant. I kind of can empathize, or I can kind of identify with what he's saying. He says he was really angry at the media because the reports just weren't factual, and he strived not to show emotion in the courtroom because he didn't want them to see him break. So he seemed pretty indignant so maybe he's innocent, right?
I don't know, because I've never been in that situation, but I think that you have to choose what you're going to, like, you have to pick your story before you go to court and before you go through this process, and then you have to stick to it. Scott had, just by popular opinion, because of the cheating, it made the case, and the fishing, it made the case look really bad for him. And dyeing the hair and the goatee and the $10,000 cash and his brother's license, I mean, it just didn't look good for him. But the fact of the matter is that he clearly established his innocence from the get-go. And once you pick the side that you're on, Cheryl, I think that people have to stay there, because when you waffle back and forth or change your story multiple times, you look like a crazy person. And what ends up happening is then they can turn around and say, this is a compulsive liar. They are not a credible
Mm-hmm.
person. They have no
Mm-hmm.
credibility. They have perjured themselves repeatedly and gone back and changed their story. And the fact of the matter is, they would have thrown the book at him in half the time that it took them to. So it's unfortunate that you have to look very stoic. But even in cases where people have said that they're guilty, they also appear stoic in these horrible cases where mothers have killed their own children, and they just look stoic. It's like, and I wonder
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
how can you sit there and express little to no emotion? But I think that it probably feels very surreal, and you've rehearsed what you're going to say, and that's why they look that way.
The whole demeanor thing is hard. Because some people don't want to show emotion in front of
Hmm.
other people, So, but I want to just tell you guys why his death sentence was changed to life without parole. During the jury selection, the judge made an error when he dismissed potential jurors if they were against the death penalty. It's the law in California that if you are against the death penalty, the judge is supposed to ask you questions about it. And the judge didn't do that. Tisk, tisk, tisk. So it was commuted to life without parole. So the investigative journalist, Mike Gudgel, says most journalists who covered the case from beginning to end expected a hung jury. He doesn't know anyone who isn't terribly conflicted by the verdict. Initially, he had covered the case for a year and a half, and then had gone on to cover other things like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the Scott Peterson case always bothered him. So when he got back from covering the two wars, he devoted as much time as he could digging more into what might have happened to Lacey. After poring over evidence, he comes back to the burglary. And as I said before, it seems the two burglars that were caught changed the date that they said they committed the burglary, so it would exonerate them from having anything to do with Lacey's disappearance and murder. He feels the most important information is the van. At the very beginning, police were looking for a brown van. The neighbor had seen it the morning of the robbery of Medina's house, and all the media was also looking for a brown van. The van could back up the theory that Lacey had been abducted. A burned out brown van was found near the house, but after inspection, the crime lab found it was not connected to her disappearance. So Shireen asks Scott, if he didn't kill Lacey, then who did? And Scott says, there was a burglary across the street from our home. There were a lot of people in that burglary. I believe that Lacey went over there to see what was going on, and that's when she was taken. He says, we want some DNA tests done, so we will be filing for that, and that's what they did earlier this year. We want further discovery. We'll be asking for that as well, because the previous district attorney has said publicly that they continue to receive tips and leads, and they've kept all that secret. So from what I see, a lot of what is in dispute is the timeline. There does seem to me to be some reasonable doubt because we are talking about minutes and several people stating when they did something or when they saw something, and what if some of them are wrong. So prosecution feels that Lacey was dead by 10:18 a.m. because a neighbor saw their dog walking around with a leash attached to its collar, and she says she put the dog back in their yard by 10:18 a.m. And they can corroborate that, by cell phone, blah, blah, blah. She had gone and done something else after that. So they have the timeline of 10:18 that she put the dog back in the yard. But there's evidence that Lacey was alive after that time with all those witnesses seeing her, and they swear it was well after 10 o'clock. And that would mean that Scott did not commit the murder, right? Because he left the house at 10. Also, there was a mailman that claimed that the dog wasn't in the yard at 10:30 a.m. after the other neighbor said she put the dog in the yard. And he said the dog was not in the yard when he went to deliver their mail. So the timeline is not concrete to me. So Scott, his team, and the people who believe he was wrongfully convicted focus on the burglary and what police did not follow up on, witness tips. It also came to light that there was a Croton watch that was pawned on December 31st. When Lacey went missing, she was wearing a Croton watch. Scott says Lacey inherited the watch from her grandmother, and he and Lacey joked that it was her rapper watch because it was very gaudy. Modesto police contacted the pawn shop and told the owner that they thought it was Lacey's, so they went and picked it up. But the watch is now nowhere to be found. So was it Lacey's? So Scott's asked about it in prison, and he says he knew it was missing, and the first time he heard that the police knew about it being pawned was well after his arrest. He says the police have to provide discovery and exculpatory evidence, but the police hadn't shared it with the defense. He says the police covered it up. The defense says it may or may not have been Lacey's, but the defense should have they should have gotten the information that the police went to the pawn shop. It's similar to Alec Baldwin, the case dismissed.
Right.
That the prosecution didn't disclose. They didn't share the evidence with the defense, whether it would have helped Alec or not. The point is they had to share it. So One of the problems for Scott is that once he was off death row, he lost state-sponsored representation. Scott's attorney noticed that the newly formed Los Angeles Innocence Project had a DNA grant. So in 2023, Scott Peterson's appellate attorney reached out to the LA Innocence Project in hopes that they would take on Scott's case. And the Innocence Project only gets involved if they think they can win a case. So they have to strongly believe that's in Scott's innocence, and they are taking on his case. So on May 29th of this year, 2024, there was a DNA motion hearing, and the judge denies nearly all the DNA testing requests from Scott Peterson's team. I think they requested for 15 pieces of evidence. For example, the blood that was on the mattress found in the burned out van, that was all denied, and the only DNA testing that was granted was for the duct tape that was found on Lacey. So it remains to be seen if Scott will be granted a new trial. So Scott was the most hated man in America, just like Casey Anthony was the most hated woman. Was he tried in the media? Did he get a fair trial? What do you think?
I don't know about a fair trial because I do definitely feel like our judicial system has flaws in it, just like any other system. But I will say that if he is innocent, he made a lot. Okay, if he's innocent of killing Lacey and her unborn baby, he's definitely guilty of being a total dirtbag, of cheating, of not treating his wife properly, of being a liar, and all those other things. So,
which he admits to. He said he was an asshole for cheating.
Yeah, and I do believe that he lied to the police about the money in his car, about his brother's license, about about the dyed hair and the goatee. I gotta be honest, if I were being hounded by the police or the paparazzi, I definitely wouldn't go blonde and grow a mustache.
Well, you couldn't. You can't grow a mustache. You don't think that's
I can.
You don't think
Oh,
that's
yes, I
plausible?
can.
No, you
I,
don't think that's plausible? If people were
I,
spitting at you and
no, I don't think, no, put a hat on, get a wig. Come on.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. I don't want to be on Scott Peterson's jury and I don't want to have to decide for him. But I will say, if he was the most hated man in America, Cheryl, he didn't really do a lot to turn that around.
So what do you think he should have done differently?
Well, don't go fishing. Because it's boring and it's the 24th of what, December? Good God. Like, why aren't you out like every other man in America buying the last pair of slippers in Macy's because
Doing
someone
last
else
minute
forgot them?
shopping.
Exactly. And also, you don't have to just buy things for your wife at the last minute. You now have to buy a baby something. And like everybody knows that when your husband goes, I need to run some errands on December 24th, it's not to go fishing.
Okay, wait, I have a question. From what I told you, do you feel like there's reasonable doubt?
I feel like just from what you've told me, I haven't seen the documentary. Yes, there's reasonable doubt. There's holes in this case.
Yep, I do
But
too.
but I don't um but I still think he's a dirtbag.
He's a dirtbag, but do you think he? So I can't really say either way.
I don't
I
know.
feel like
I feel like CCTV has changed cases so drastically.
oh yeah,
Also feel like timestamps have changed things drastically. It's almost impossible for us not to have timestamps of where we are because of cell phone usage, text messages,
yeah, but
CCTV, logging in and out of things, security cameras. I mean, Cheryl, it's
this
almost
was over
impossible.
20 years ago.
Yeah, and also
So
cars. Our cars are all digital now too. So you turn your car on and you turn your car off. There's history there. You log
I
into
know,
your
but not
map,
any,
you know?
but not back then.
No.
So
So I
honestly,
feel like
the strongest evidence they had, which is it evidence, was one, he was having an affair, and two, where the bodies washed up because it's close to where. Oh no, it wasn't. He was 90 miles out. Whatever. He
yeah,
said he went fishing, and
but
then
it was the
but
fishing and the fact that, his obviously someone took them out in the water and dumped the body. But here's the other thing. The girlfriend's testimony was damning.
damning in that it showed that he had an
Remember,
affair.
he didn't tell her. She told the cops, and then she continued to pretend like they were still just dating and having a great relationship.
Yeah, but there's a lot of so one of the things was that he was she told the she is so she recorded the calls and she holds his feet to the fire on the fact that he told her before Lacey went missing that he quote unquote lost his wife. So that was his story to her, was that he was married, lost his wife. At that point, Lacey was alive and well, so she hadn't even gone missing yet. But that's what he told her.
Right.
But you can look
And
at
that
it
could have
like,
been, and that
well,
could have been, uh,
what if he
I
just
mean,
wanted to have sex with her? So he told her, I no longer have a wife. But it's not like
right.
he was planning to
And
kill
I've
her.
heard,
He just said that.
I actually dated a guy who, we only went out on one date, but he actually lied to me and told me that his wife had died, and then told me after the date that his wife was actually dying. So, I mean, apparently,
You're like,
if you're going
which is it?
if you're going to cheat, any story will do. I don't know.
I don't know.
But
I
I
feel
will say, I will say that, yeah, I don't know. I'm so glad that I'm not in charge. Like I said, I'm not on the jury.
yeah. I just think that there is not. I think that witnesses. I told you I would make a terrible witness. I think that it's very easy to get your time off. Can you remember if I asked you what you did yesterday at 10:30? Would you be able to tell me? No, nobody can. You know what I mean? Like,
I could.
so. Okay, what'd you
I
do at
could tell you
10:30
what I was
yesterday?
doing at 10:30 yesterday.
What can you share it?
I can't. I'm gonna plead the
Oh,
fifth.
okay. All right. Well, anyway, I just think that there's reasonable doubt. I think he probably did it, but as far as a fair trial, I think that they should have taken their time and not had a speedy trial. I think he probably at
Yeah.
least would have been a better case presented. But I do think there's reasonable doubt. And
Well,
I don't quite understand why the judge doesn't allow, I'm sure it's expensive, but it was a female judge, why she only granted a DNA test for one piece. They asked it for 15 pieces. Because if Lacey's blood was in the back of that van, that's damning evidence of his
yeah.
innocence.
Well, I guess we'll find out because they picked up his case and it sounds like they're running with it. So
Yeah,
there's going
we'll
to be
see.
some interesting updates to this. I
Stay
will say
tuned.
that regardless as to whether he did it or she was abducted and someone else did it, it's a horrible, horrible, horrible crime. I mean, this one I remember just was like haunting to read and to hear about in the news. It was just devastating because everybody wanted them to find her alive.
Alive. The baby, it
It,
was Christmas Eve.
yeah.
Oh.
I mean, so yeah, this was a horrible crime. But you know what else is a crime?
What's that, Joy?
That we are so freaking out of time.
We're so out of time. Thank you for listening, everyone, and don't complicate your day. All creativity, commentary, and opinions in this podcast belong to Cheryl and Joy. Music composed and mixed by Gabe McKeon. Logo and merch managed by Cheryl Callan. Podcast editing, advertising, and social media managed by Joy McKeon. Legal representation provided by John Boljezic. Please like, subscribe, follow, and listen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Audible.com, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And remember, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok, or you can email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
Bye, fishes.